World affairs, the United Nations, Europe, the European Union, civilization, science, and culture. Today, I have the distinct pleasure and honor to welcome here at Strategy International Professor Ambassador Laszlo Molnar, who, among others, has been a career diplomat and ambassador of Hungary to the United Nations, but also one of the negotiators of the team of Hungary to the entrance of the European Union. My name is Dr. Marios Eftimiopoulos. I'm the CEO of Strategy International, and this is Prime Analysis. Dear Laszlo, dear Ambassador, welcome at Strategy International.
Thank you, Marios. It's really a pleasure to be here with you.
It is a distinct honor and pleasure to have you here among us in Cyprus, which, as I understand, it's part of a choice, if you want, with regards to living conditions in European choices and being able to move around and reside in Cyprus. And I think you're one of the newest residents of the Republic of Cyprus.
Almost like that. It was a very, very quick decision, actually. We were exploring where to get settled after we just returned from the United States, where I was a professor for 6.5 years. And upon our arrival to Europe, we were thinking about what would be an ideal place for us. And actually, my kids were the ones who were here in Cyprus before, and they were coming up with the idea that they just love this country so much, and we should go and explore, etc. And all right, so I thought, why not? I've been here before, but many decades ago. So we came, and by now, I just have a lease signed already, which is not here where we are seated now. It will be in Paphos, where we intend to spend the next year or so, definitely, and who knows.
Very good. Very good. Well, welcome to the Republic of Cyprus, and welcome to the corner edge of the European Union, a crossworld of civilizations, if you want, with regards to European and non-European, Middle East and North Africa region. So we're very humbled and happy to have you here among us. And I know that having met and having discussed a few things already together with regards mostly to pertinent, if you want, with your professionalism in your life and your experiences and your successes, we thought together that it would be wise to have this conversation because, you know, at Prime Analysis, the idea is to discuss the experiences, to discuss things that bond us together with regard to both professional, academic, and other issues. And I think the matter of the fact that you are also a professor, but you are also a career diplomat for more than 30 years, and that you have been in those positions, key positions for your own country, Hungary, another European Union member state, it makes it important for the dialogue of civilizations. One, if you want, one of the quotes that we are using between our colleagues at Strategy International, also our partners, we're using the word, dialogue of civilization. So I guess we have a lot of things to say, and allow me to start, if you want, with something that we commonly do with all the people that we're welcoming here. Life. Laszlo, a young person, Laszlo with dreams, vision, a young person who wants to take part in, if you want, the world of diplomacy, may I call it the world of academia. Tell us, if you want, the milestones that you consider as most important.
Thank you. That's definitely a long story, so I try to put it in a nutshell.
Okay.
But I have to disappoint you right away that I did not really know exactly what I want to be for a long, long while. When I was towards the end of the high school years, or gymnasium as we call it in Hungary, I still was wondering about what would be the best for me to do. And I had all kinds of weird ideas. actually most of them related to nature.
Okay.
But since I was not able to decide, I thought that probably to be an economist would be a good choice because, I can decide later. So I went to the University of Economic Sciences. At that time, it was called Karl Marx University in Budapest. Now it has a different name. And it was after the second year at the university when I felt that international relations is the direction I should take. So I chose that particular specification, and by the time I graduated there, after 4.5 years, I knew that I want to be a diplomat. But that was a long, laboring process.
But I guess throughout your studies and throughout your co-students, throughout the wish to travel, I guess, around the world. I mean, a person who wants to travel to see the nature, because I guess having seen or having discussed, if you want, the proportions of your life, you've traveled enough also. So, discovering nature, probably, later on with the UN, probably that gave you an impetus with discussion on environment, on climate change, and maybe that made you more engaged. But I guess university, several discussions and options were on the table for all of you, I believe. So international relations is a topic that you also know as a professor, and you have taught for many, many years, that international relations is the most important key word that defines, if you want, a complex, but then again, most important environment that we now call the international community, in the way that they decide, the way that they work.
Absolutely, I agree with that. While I was still a student, I had the exposure to different cultures.
Right.
At that time, studying Russian was mandatory, actually. So I even had to go to a course for like 3 months or so. And I enjoyed that, actually. It was in Russia, in former Soviet Union. And I learned a lot about them and their people there. And later on, I had...
Which year are we talking about? Like,
that
which decade at least?
It was like around 80.
80s.
Yeah.
Okay.
I graduated in 82.
Right. So before the fall of the Soviet
Yes,
Union.
that's why I'm saying
Yeah, but
Soviet
during
Union.
the decade of I guess Glasnost and Perestroika were being published.
Yeah, actually, again, I enjoyed that very much. It was quite an experience, extremely intense.
Of course.
And I also realized while I was there how different they can be as individuals from each other with different ethnic background. Right. I met people from all kinds of parts of the country, the huge country, and I developed some good friendships. And later on, I had a very special opportunity to spend like 2 months. I was still a student in Finland, on a small island, actually.
Right.
So it was another kind of exposure to a completely different culture. And I became very much intrigued about what's really going on, what we have a kind of common perception about, let's say, the Soviet Union or about the Nordic people. Then I still had some additional one which was kind of for a longer period, for a couple of weeks, that I spent in Venice, Italy.
Okay.
So altogether, this was
So from the north to the south.
Indeed, and altogether, it just somehow developed the flavor in me for international relations, I believe.
If I may ask, at which point did you decide that you wanted to go to I'm not going to say politics, but diplomat, to become a diplomat?
I would not even accept if you would say politics, because I never wanted to do anything with politics.
When I say politics, not party politics, but rather the international community of international relations.
Yeah, I decided to do the entry exam to the Ministry for Foreign Affairs in '82, towards the very end of my studies there, because It was around June or so when we finished. And a few months earlier, I felt that I have to give a shot. So I did apply for an entry exam, which actually did not fly well because I was told that everything went perfectly fine, but they have too many candidates with the English language, and they were looking for some specific languages, and they advised me and a very good friend of mine. We went together for this entry exam, and they asked us to work for a foreign trade company for a year or so and then return to the foreign ministry. Then I decided that this is not my cup of tea. I did my due diligence. I went to see some folks at the foreign trade company, but did not attract me whatsoever. And instead of that, what I did was to stay with the university, and I became a new researcher of that particular faculty.
Okay, so that goes parallel now. Your life goes parallel.
And that particular department where I started to work for was in charge of training the Hungarian diplomats, which it was at that time in the very, very fetal stage, an early stage.
Right.
Most of the diplomats up to that point were trained in the Soviet Union. Well, we decided that we want to do it on our own, and I became a part of...
Things were changing overall.
Absolutely, and I became part of that faculty.
Okay.
So it was very funny because it was right after my graduation, so I started to teach those students who were amongst my good friends just 1 year below me.
Interesting.
So, and I was there for quite a while. Then I continued with the Institute for Foreign Relations, which is already bringing me closer to the diplomacy. I had the opportunity to go as a researcher to the US for a year. I was with the Institute for East-West Security Studies. That gave me the flavor for the security, international security. Yes. And then while I was working there and doing some studies for the Institute, some folks at the ministry felt that I could be probably a good resource for new negotiations which were starting in Vienna related to conventional forces. So when I returned from the US, from the Institute, which was in New York, I was asked to join the ministry. And that was based on my scholarly work, I would say. I decided to do that, and I started out like, anyone who is just joining. So I was accepted before, but I had this very weird way of going back to the ministry. And
it sounds familiar, by the way, the way of, because as I understood from early ages and stages of your life, you want to be a free soul. So you wanted to explore and see things. So you had your options open. That's what I mean.
I think it's pretty fair.
Because you have a parallel road which now introduces academia.
Indeed. I started out in the academia, and then I turned to research in New York, and then I joined the official diplomatic staff. So I started my career as a career diplomat, as a desk officer.
Yeah, as always.
That's usually the case, unless you are a political appointee, because then you get a beautiful, nice title.
Yes.
But I started as a desk officer, and by the way, and that is historic, and I like these kind of points of inflection. Mm-hmm. My first assignment was to work on a study as a desk officer on how the opening of the border for the East German tourists towards Austria will impact our foreign policy decisions, room for maneuvering. Because what we felt at that time was that the East Germans were just coming and coming to Hungary and did not want to leave. that was the meeting place for them with their relatives from West Germany, because both countries allowed their citizens to come to Hungary. It was never a question for the West Germans, but the East Germans had this privilege to come to another socialist country, and so they meted up, and it was clear that something is brewing, and the number of the East German tourists
was like showing
increasing.
that they were migrating.
And we felt that we have to do something, and they included me in their analytical team as well. And I started this with great enthusiasm, and certainly my conclusion was that there is no question about that. We do have to open the border,
Right.
and this is the time for that. So this was very interesting, but
these were interesting times, like in the sense, because you mentioned the word interesting times.
and I will do that again and again.
Yeah, because at that moment, the fall of the Soviet Union, the new mission is to integrate countries, Central Eastern European, into the European Union. So slowly you're going to the European acquis communautaires processes. But it takes time, diplomats, training, decision-making, political will, and at the same time, daily regional issues and questions. The unification of East-West Germany,
This was even before that.
Right.
This was even before that. But
what you're saying is, it was coming.
Indeed,
That's what you're saying.
Actually, this was a kind of pioneering work from our side.
Right.
and I'm very proud, not because of my own contribution whatsoever. That was just a minor thing, but
But that shaped your opinion
and my country at that point, they did a very, very important historic step.
Right.
We did open the borders.
Right.
Right after that, actually, I was asked to join our negotiating team in Vienna, negotiating the Treaty on Conventional Forces, the CFE. And while I said before that I'm going to say important or historic again and again, is because we started out a negotiation process between two opposing military blocs. We are talking about late 80s.
Right.
Okay.
So the tension is high.
Tension is high. We were the Warsaw Pact on one side, and there was the NATO on the other side. And we started out, talking about a treaty which would reduce the level of conventional forces and the tension with that.
Right.
In addition to that, all kinds of confidence-building measures. But in the meantime, history took its path, and what happened was that the Warsaw Treaty got pretty much dissolved. In parallel with that, the Soviet Union.
It was happening basically on the back end.
While we were negotiating.
While you were negotiating, things were happening on the back end.
Indeed. Well, we started negotiations with a mandate, like between two military blocs, to have something negotiated which is good for both sides. We ended up not having sides because what happened, Warsaw Pact basically got dissolved in the process. It's during the process. Then the Soviet Union fell apart. There was German unification, and I can still tell you, and this is historic. Another second event which really hit me. I was negotiating certain parts of the CFE treaty, like aircraft and verification protocol, stuff like that, as a young diplomat in Vienna.
But you were part of the Warsaw Pact? Hungary as part of the Warsaw Pact?
Yeah, absolutely. We started out like that. And we knew exactly when the unification of Germany is going to happen. We knew the date. It was clear. And
that's very important.
It is historic. And
because in some other terms, I remember when I was a student, they said they were not aware. They were aware that something was happening. They were aware that people were revolting, but they weren't sure about the date. You're claiming the date, which is quite interesting.
It was a long time ago, but I have to tell you that we all were aware that we were negotiating certain parts, the ones I mentioned. I was involved in a working group. And we were under enormous time pressure, so we had to finish with the treaty.
Of course.
For signature very quickly on, and we were working day and night, literally. So we did work late into the night, at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, actually. So that was the case on that day as well. And we knew that at midnight, East Germany is going to cease to exist. And we were like, how this is going to play out. Yeah. I remember, and I hope it's not unethical to name someone here. His first name was Oswald, from the East German delegation, DDR at that point. He took the floor like 10 minutes before midnight and started to defend the position of East Germany, the DDR, and the so-called Warsaw Pact, which was like,
to probably avoid escalation. There are some documentaries that actually were saying that some things were taking place in the western part, and there was an announcement in the East German part the following morning, however, not midnight, that basically gave them the option of freedom, and everybody was wondering, what do you mean? And then the rest is history.
Yeah. What was the most exciting moment for us, and that was historic, when we got to midnight. And
the order came from who? Like that? How did they know that midnight?
We knew the date. We knew that this is the last day while the East Germany still exists. So at midnight, and this is a diplomatic stuff, a kind of procedural issue, and no one was really surprised, but we were like shivering.
Yeah, because you don't know the next day how this.
No. But we were still working. So what happened exactly at midnight? The West German delegate put up his fingers and spoke to the chairman that, Mr. Chairman, point of order. The point of order is when you realize something is not going accordingly, so you have to stop the process. At that point, the East German delegate I mentioned already, his name was Oswald, without saying a word, he stood up, bowed his head, and left the room. And that was the time when we were really shivering. And then the West German delegate was respectful. He waited till the East German colleague left. Then he said that, Mr. Chairman, I would like to present you the position of Germany on this issue related to the verification protocol.
Right.
This is the way it went. So we ended up with a treaty which basically was there for a long time to come, which did not have the two sides any longer. Right. So we were like thinking about...
In history, it remains as one, but very few wonder decades later how it happened. But it shapes your experiences, definitely.
Absolutely. But to cut it short, the original idea was to get some very brutal and strong verification protocol between the two sides to check each other. That was the first time when we realized that this is just meaningless, because there is no east side any longer. So we ended up with a verification protocol, and I was involved in drafting it. Didn't have much time. I got a night to do that, which was about basing the verification system for the future on groupings. And I realized, that what the heck shall I do with let's say what's going on in the Netherlands, as far as we are talking about only conventional forces, not nuclear.
Conventional forces.
So how many tanks the Netherlands has? Why would that be a concern to Hungary?
Right. So things start to shape up. Yeah, yeah.
And then,
of course,
and I shaped the proposal
reintroduction of
according.
new foreign policy objectives.
I
Yes,
have
yes,
to
yes.
shape the treaty. I mean, the draft.
That's a big. That's a big
accordingly.
experience.
So I think that I realized that for us, it's definitely much more important what's going on at our own borders.
Okay.
That's where we have to base, our focus. Anyway, that was a very, very important moment, which gave me a fantastic boost because I felt
Absolutely.
that I can be a part of doing things here, even if, with a very, very small token in this from my side, but it was still very, very exciting. So this is how it started.
Thank you for that.
Then I, just to go to the next step, I was asked to join our team in the UN, the Hungarian delegation, as I think I was at that time like a counselor, or not
Right.
even a counselor, first secretary. And
So your first experience with the UN was even before when you were.
oh yeah,
consul.
absolutely. And the reason they did that was that we became members of the UN Security Council.
Yeah,
they
as
wanted
non-permanent members. Yeah,
as
for-
non-permanent members
for 2 years,
absolutely.
right?
It is for 2 years. It was in 1992 and 93, and they added one additional position to the existing team in New York, and I was the addition.
Yeah, right.
I was the lucky one who was chosen for this, and basically what happened was that instead of doing the CFE negotiations for longer, I switched to learn about the UN, to learn what the heck the UN Security Council
How it
is
works in
about,
practice,
how it
yes,
works,
yes.
because it's not
Yes,
not
yes, yes.
that common that
No.
a country like mine can be a member of
No,
the
but
UN
the-
Security Council.
Right.
We
But
only had one.
The protocol, the processes, the entrance, the exits, the point of orders, as you said, and so on and so forth. How do we raise our stakes?
But before this, 1992, 93, we only that my country was in the Security Council just once. So this was the second time, and actually the
And
last
it was
up to now.
on a time of change.
Right, and during that period, I just very briefly, during that period, I started as a member of the delegation, but I was promoted to be the deputy, both at the mission as well as in the Security Council. So
Yeah,
I became the
so
deputy
you're
to the
increasing-
ambassador.
You're going to administrative steps.
That's how I finished in January 1994 as deputy in the UN Security Council, completely exhausted because we were on call basically for 2 years,
On everything.
7 days a week.
Yeah, Security Council.
Anytime if the meeting was at 2 or 3 o'clock at night.
And you
then-
cannot leave New York, actually. You have to
no,
be
no,
there
no.
all around.
Listen, if the ambassador left New York, then I definitely had to
Yeah,
be
you
there.
won, yeah.
And it happened many, many times that they really wanted to get the body together. But it was, especially for a small delegation, for a small country with a small delegation, it was extremely demanding. I could go into great length on that, but probably for another discussion.
Absolutely.
But the point is that we were waiting actually for the end of that 2-year period, extremely exhausted, and we all felt that this is the time when we can relax. We are relieved. It was like that for 2 or 3 days, because after 2 or 3 days we realized that something is completely bad here. Because we were sitting in the middle of information all the time. We were shaping big things. At that time, actually, the war in former Yugoslavia was raging
that's
on.
what I was thinking. The Balkans is on flame.
Absolutely. So for us, it was
The Middle
top,
East, the Balkans.
and many other issues, Cambodia, and many other issues. And
Africa.
there
Latin
were a lot.
America.
But for us, for the Hungarian
But this,
delegation,
the end of the Cold War, for those that are reading the history books, it may be easy to comprehend. Okay, and you say, okay, well, there were revolts, there were changes of governments, there were people shaping. But in reality, if you are at the top level of the Security Council and you have to observe every single bit and piece that is coming in on a daily basis, that's a lot of work. And I guess didn't change so much even today.
it did change a lot at that point, and I tell you why.
Administratively,
I
maybe,
tell
not
you
politically,
why.
yeah.
You hit the nail on the head, because in those 2 years, 92, 93, there was a completely different spirit of cooperation all around. We had fantastic new
There was a momentum that was built up.
a new era in a
Yeah,
way.
yeah, yeah.
What is the most important is that the 5 permanent members of the council were cooperating, which is definitely not the case now.
Because the Soviet Union becomes Russia.
Soviet became
And
Russia.
they're reluctant, I presume.
And
to
they
what
were
would say.
trying to look for their own new
Right.
identity, and
Exactly,
they were very open-minded. They were, very much able to and ready to negotiate
I remember
together.
the West was also welcoming the change.
Yeah.
Not in a profile, we won the Cold War sort of thing, but rather let's build on a common interest, which unfortunately didn't last for many years.
No, that's the point. That I was, again, very lucky, because I was there for that kind of window of opportunity, or the opening in a way, for those 2 years where we did have this kind of new spirit of cooperation, etc. We did work very intensely, and we did have meaningful new resolutions. That was over in 1994.
Can I go a bit fast forward?
Yes.
All what you said, I'm pretty sure you used it in your capacity building for the entrance of Hungary to the EU.
EU.
Yes. Likewise, I presume that the negotiations were constant and intense, as for all accession countries into the EU. Back then, it's not the EU still, or has become EU, European Union. It was the European Community which changed into the European Union, and the European Union is now in negotiations with Hungary. A milestone of importance.
Yes, I was very lucky, because even before the change of the regime, I was promoted to be Deputy State Secretary in charge of security issues, international security, arms control.
Much more regional and much more intense.
Absolutely regional, and
Regional in the sense of the European continent.
Right. So I was dealing with all kinds of non-proliferation regimes. I was dealing with export control regimes. I became chairperson of different international fora as Deputy State Secretary. But then there was the new government, the first democratically elected government, and then I became. I had the opportunity to go abroad, but that was not at the change of regime. It was after the first socialist government.
Right.
When they.
So we're talking about years of.
Yeah, years of.
End of the 90s.
I'm talking about 1998, 1997, and 1998. In 1997, I was still with the government, which was socialist at that point. But then the first so-called Orban government won. And in 1998, the minister at that time, his name is János Martonyi, he offered me the position of one of the 3 state secretaries negotiating our accession to the EU. So that was the time when I started doing that. It was much later than the episode with the UN Security Council, etc.
Yes.
But it was a very intense period again, very historic again, traveling to Brussels like at least 2 or 3 times a week. And I was negotiating certain chapters of the acquis communautaire. I liked that very much.
Mm-hmm. But I guess day one, what do we do now? On day one, what do we do now? We go to Brussels, and then what?
What happened with me was that in 1999, I felt that this would be time to go for a posting. And then I was sent to New York as Consul General first. So I was my country's consul general in New York.
In the UN or in New
No,
York?
no, no. It's in New York.
The diplomatic,
it's
the diplomatic,
bilateral.
yeah.
Yeah,
The
I was in
diplomatic
charge of
representation.
representing the country in 19.
So you have a consulate in New York.
We have a consul general in New York, and I became the consul general with the rank of ambassador already, because I had that already back from Hungary. And I was in charge of the so-called 19 consular districts out of the whole U.S., which was quite a lot.
Just to say for our audience that it's common for general consulates to split the states for those states that they are.
Absolutely.
I mean, the Greek government does the same thing. The Cypriot government does
It
the
is.
same thing.
It is the case. We had a consular section in Washington where the embassy was. The consul there was in charge of other states.
Other states.
I had 19 of them, depending on how many consulates you have, we had at that time one more on the West Coast in Los Angeles, and we were just setting up a new one in Chicago. And these are supposed to cover the whole country.
Yes.
But pretty quickly on, and not that quickly, it was in 2002 when I was asked to take over the position of the permanent representative to the UN. The reason for that was that they wanted to make the change already, because the ambassador to that point, who I worked with actually before, a very, very good friend of mine and a fantastic colleague, we worked together in the Security Council. At that time, I was his deputy. But in 2002, they thought that I would be the good one because I am right there.
Yeah, that's number one.
Cost effective.
Yeah, exactly.
They just have to find
and time effective too.
Time effective.
Instead of going to this job,
I still had to go back to Budapest to the Parliament for the hearings, because the UN ambassador has to listen.
Yes, to the committee.
So I did that. They approved, and I went back and I took the position. I certainly left the position of the Consul General. There was a new Consul General who replaced me. And then I became the permanent representative. For those years, by the way, this is the time also including 2004, when several new countries were adopted as new member states of the EU.
And you were in parallel with Cyprus?
Indeed, in 2004, we entered the EU together with Cyprus. And from then on, it was very exciting because, we were like UN diplomats, and I was, between 2002, when I presented my credentials to Kofi Annan, he was the Secretary General at that time. Actually, he passed away, unfortunately, a couple of years ago. But he was, in my mind, probably the best Consul General, the best Secretary General of the UN. I love to work with him. But I was representing my country between 2002 and 2004 as any other member states of the United Nations. Starting 2004, the ball game completely changed.
Again?
Because instead of going to the UN, we had to hammer out a common position, within the EU. And we always had a president of the EU, and we had to work together. So we spent like 90% of our time not in the UN any longer. That was what I did for 2 years.
Right.
But within our group, including Cyprus as new member as well.
Who's the representative then?
At that time, a very good friend of mine, Andreas Mavroyanis. He was the one we developed very good ties. Actually, we met here already. He's a fascinating person. I regarded him very, very high. He's
highly respected in the Cypriot society as well.
I know that his moral values are really there. So
Indeed.
And we developed a very good working relationship, and not only working, but kind of friendship as well.
And I guess it's important because you find each other 10 years later, 20 years later in Cyprus.
Indeed.
And that says a lot about, friendships and diplomats. And, for academics who write the analysis, the historiography, the events, they put them down, we sometimes miss one link, that there are friendships and collaborations that are set up globally. Whether, if it's an EU, you have the EU community members and experts, others in the UN levels, and so on and so forth. And I think these groups of countries joining the EU, you had joint reasons, joint objectives. Eventually, the acquis communautaire is bringing us all together in the European values.
Indeed. I still have to add that there were many of those within the EU with whom I did not really develop anything specific, kind of friendship. We were working together certainly in a very correct way and supporting each other. We were supposed to work together as,
But that's the acquis communautaire. In reality, the introduction or the steps to the introduction of those who are willing to join the EU is to learn how to work together.
Absolutely, and we did, and within this and during this process, it's a personal matter with whom you develop closer ties. And with Andreas, I definitely did. And I have to tell you, it's probably not a surprise that when I was thinking about whether I shall spend more time here, upon the initiative of my kids, who love the country already, so they said that we have to come here. The first person who came to my mind was Andreas, and I felt that I had this very good feeling about him. Felt a man of integrity with high moral standards that I recalled from the past. We worked together till 2005 when I left. I think he still stayed on as permanent representative of Cyprus, but I returned to Hungary. I did go back, by the way, because I had a very special duty. I was a so-called elected official of the NPT review process for 4 years, which is the nuclear...
So you were both elected too?
He was not. And it is my...
No, I'm talking about you. I said in the sense, not only diplomacy, but also being elected into...
Yes. So the way it goes is that countries, in this case, those countries which are member states of the NPT, the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, they have to nominate according to different geographic regions. And they started out the new review cycle, which lasts for 5 years. They started out with the Western group. The Western group elected or nominated, and the membership elected a Swedish diplomat. These diplomats are always from the permanent representatives, ambassadors, either from New York, as I was there, or from Geneva. It could also be the case with Vienna. But in this case, the first, in that particular review cycle, the first chairman of the first so-called preparatory committee meeting, which is a 2-3 weeks long meeting, there was a Swedish diplomat, Ambassador Salander. Then for the second year, it was up to the so-called Eastern Regional Group, and Hungary belonged to that, as it is the case still now, without any political reasoning. But at that point, I was nominated and elected, so I took over the chairmanship from Henrik Salander, who actually was a great musician as well. So he even used his skills during the conference later on when I was chairing the second preparatory committee meeting in Geneva, where I had some very, very difficult job to do. That was the time when tension was very, very high between the United States and Iran.
Right.
That was the time when North Korea announced its withdrawal from the treaty, but the treaty had some provisions trying to regulate how one country can leave, but the North Koreans, the DPRK, did not care a bit about this, how to solve this problem. So I had these kind of ad hoc situations to deal with. But that was while I was still the permanent representative to the UN. It was an additional job, as you just said. It's an elected position.
Now, I'm going to fast track to 2024. We can talk for hours. I guess we can talk for hours. But this last part, I'm going to use it very shortly for the, I don't know how to stress it, but there are a lot of things happening in our world, regionally or globally. In a nutshell, how do you see things developing? And I'll tell you why, because of your experiences. One of the reasons I let this discussion go forward with more details is exactly because you lived in three, let's say, important changes of historiography global. Fall of the Soviet Union, opportunity, regional wars that become, if you want, more regional and more global, entrance to the EU, another opportunity, then we have a decade of financial crisis, big issues, migrational issues, modern hybrid elements, hybrid challenges, disinformation, level of technology, and so on and so forth, opportunities through space, a lot of trade agreements, a lot of agreements that are no longer in operation, new alliances, current alliances, a growing EU, but at the same time with regional challenges all around it. And we've seen the invasion of Russia to Ukraine and the Middle East, among others, including also North Africa and Libya, what is happening in Mali and Chad, and it goes on and on and on. I'm not going to go for the rest of the world. The rest of the world is not also in a good shape. I personally don't consider that we live in a peaceful world, but that's my personal opinion. Considering the amount of operations, let's say, the UN has, they only increase, small or big. Same for EU, same for NATO, same. So where are we going with this? New shaping of world economics, new shape of technology stuff, easy threats, nuclear threats, continued war threats. How can we envision, if you want, the future affairs, considering that we have families, we are people that we believed in the correction of mistakes or historical mistakes. We believed in a multipolar world that is collaborative. I don't see so much collaboration. I see much of egoism or political egoism, if we can call it like that. Where do things
Listen,
go?
I'm not going to disagree with you. Absolutely. You get it really in a nutshell what is really going on, and I don't have any basis to be optimistic about where we are and where we are heading.
Right.
You remember I mentioned that particular window of opening or opportunity back in 92, 93 when we were in the Security Council, and when there was this special spirit of cooperation between the P5, the permanent five. Let me start with that. It's over.
Right.
One of the permanent members is Russia, which is in war, started a war with Ukraine. And if one of the member states of the permanent members of the UN Security Council has a war and all the others disagree, the organization, which is the most important in this regard and the only one, and we did not invent anything better yet.
Right.
The UN Security Council is paralyzed, completely paralyzed. There is no way to bridge this kind of division.
Yeah, because you have
and
minimum two permanent representatives who are going to go their path.
now any permanent member can veto anything, and that is happening. So if the UN, we did have many.
At some period of time, allow me if they were trying to avoid putting vetoes. They were trying to negotiate, but now it seems that it has come to on the table quite vividly.
Yes, there were all kinds of efforts, and there are still efforts. There were special groups. One of them was headed by Kofi Annan, whom I admired really. These are the wise men who were really trying to point out the responsibility of those permanent member states which are going to veto any resolution. That's one thing that you veto. But then be clever and cooperative enough to come up with something which is a good alternative.
Right.
You see? But that's not happening. Unfortunately, this is not the case. But what I wanted to highlight is that there was a short period where there was really the consensus, and we could adopt important resolutions which really helped a lot for the betterment of the world. Like those 2 years, what I mentioned, 92, 93. Now it's impossible to adopt any meaningful resolution. And if the Security Council is paralyzed, then everything else in the multilateral diplomacy is getting the impact of it.
Right.
And the impact, like, for example, what to do with the NPT, the nuclear non-proliferation. That's the problems are again there. If they start on the top, it's going to go down, and you will see the same problems everywhere. So I am not optimistic whatsoever. What I can only tell you as something what recently gave me some little hope that probably I can also do something meaningful is related to the need for dialogue.
No, please go ahead and tell us.
That's
because that's one of the ideas that brought us together also.
I was
Dialogue.
amongst many other functions. I was member of board of directors of the International Mediation Institute. That's about mediation. We talk a lot about mediation. We talk a lot about conflict resolution. We use the word of dialogue in a very general, overstretched
way.
But it is actually what we definitely need, because the dialogue is the one between those who are completely opposing themselves, or opposing each other. But if we are able to develop or institutionalize some way, some means for dialogue,
I know that
instead of what we have now.
I know that you're a creative person, and you have things in your mind, things that we shared, with regards to a larger proportion of international personalities that can be involved in a dialogue situation under a foundation, let's say, that can actually pivot, if you want, with regard to dialogue. And I think this is exactly what actually brought us together. And as I told you also, off cameras, obviously, but I also told you that, we at Strategy International, we want to do this dialogue. And you're more than welcome to explore more. And I think also Cyprus matters as well as a crossroad. And I guess you brought your family here, and and I guess because your children also travel like you travel, and they see the opportunities as they are. And I guess dialogue can also start from here.
That's what I hope for. This is something new for me as well. I mean that new as a focus.
Right.
But I am already involved in this to some extent, also as a new founder of a foundation, which has something to do with institutionalizing dialogue, looking for and promoting the idea of alliance for dialogue. I strongly believe that we do need that. We do need a different kind of approach to this.
Absolutely.
It doesn't matter whether you hate the other or not. It doesn't matter if you are
No, because
really
the
having...
alternative, we see it already happening.
Exactly. And if we just
It's
let
not
it
good.
go as it is, if we cannot stop it somehow, we don't have much reason to be optimistic for the future.
I also believe we don't have enough time because things are moving so fast because of technology, because of the inflow of information that comes in on the second, and so on and so forth. And that has turned against the tide of resolutions. I'm not going to say conflicts, resolution of issues, and also conflicts. Dialogue is a must, but I also believe that a verbal understanding where we can put, like, drawing boards, let's say going back to the drawing boards and put it down into what verbs are we going, what dialogue are we doing, who are the people, how are the stakeholders, how do you pioneer in the 21st century, 24 years inside, we're going 25 now, years inside the 21st century. So we also need to use some ways. We need to attract young people, the younger generation that will follow us, our children, our children's children, which is very important to continue that proportion of a dialogue. So I wish you luck with this. Strategy International is on board. I told you from the beginning, I'm personally also on board on that, because that's the idea. That's the idea.
This is music to my ears, certainly. And I also have this kind of sense as if we were just running out of time. And the role for the young generation is really to say no, to stop those who are doing nonsense in a way. I'm not an advocate of any movements or whatever. It's not about that. It's just we are facing terrible situations.
Dialogue.
Dialogue
includes everybody, by the way. Everybody should sit down together on a bigger table and express all those opinions that need to be expressed.
Yeah, otherwise, if we are just moving ahead with the same patterns, what we have been doing and exercising, that's not going to be helpful at all.
I know that we can go on for hours. We haven't covered the professorship too much in the U.S. For many years, you've been teaching international security, so you understand the security stakes. And I want to say that. I think this is the best way to close, if you want, the discussion. One of the things you don't know, and I'll tell you now, because it's on camera also, most importantly, so you can understand it, and close this with a bigger smile, is that I know your diplomatic story. Your diplomatic story in the UN, and then later on with the negotiation of Hungary did, because I was a student back then. And I was doing different countries on elements of negotiations, on security issues, and so on and so forth. And in terms of the committees and the people and working on this, your name was popping out, obviously, with regards to Hungary. And that has very much to do so with during my period of study. I also studied in Austria, so we're doing a lot of Central Eastern European history, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the follow-ups, the splits, and so on and so forth. And the Magyars and the storyline on how important it is, and it's truly Europe inside there. You're truly at the heart of Europe. As I said, your name was familiar, and I was trying to look at where do I remember this person from, how, and I went back to my books and I found it. And the impressive thing is, like, after decades, you get to meet a person who was at the structure of that historical pathway, which was from a Soviet Union period of time to a fully fledged European member who has to counter all the challenges that all other 27 member states of the EU has to face today. So thank you very much for the discussion. Thank you very much for coming and joining us today.
Marius, it is really a great pleasure, I can tell you. You did surprise me. I didn't know about what you just said. It's very flattering. I don't deserve that. But it also reflects on how much older I am than you are. You were a student at that.
No, that was not the idea. That was not the idea.
I understand.
No, but it is very important to know, and I always thought as a student that personalities matter. because they might be neutral as much as they can, but part of their psychology, part of their experiences does get involved with all these elements, and at the same time they shape a vision of the world. That's why I remember our professor was telling us, travel around the world, learn more, see more, discover the world. These civilizational dialogue, the way that you want to do the dialogue between people and governments and so on and so forth, this is because of your experiences.
Indeed.
And I think we need more people like that to bring in our experiences in resolving issues. The Cyprus issue is not resolved. It's the only divided country in Europe. And it's a big problem, and it seems that the other side doesn't want to talk about it, and they will eventually have to talk about it. But we have to also put some rhythm and some standards into this. And I thank you for this discussion, and it was very informative for me, and thank you very much for giving me a portion of your time. Thank you.
I thank you, and I cannot agree with you more on everything what you just said. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for watching another web series of Prime Analysis. Please like, share, subscribe, and follow into our social media and YouTube channel. My name is Dr. Marios Efthymiopoulos. I'm the CEO of Strategy International, and this was Prime Analysis. And remember, impact makes a difference.